And thank you for being here. And I am told that we should take a few minutes, let people enter, uh, notifying viewers that we're going live. And let's see, what would be small talk that I could tell you while waiting? Do I have any funny stories? Yesterday, Lauren in my office told me to talk to you about Taylor Swift, but we did that last night. Announce religion. I don't know what that means. Talk about you. All right, I'll tell you a little something about myself. I was born in Houston, Texas, and I had a really interesting father. I don't want to sound like my mother wasn't a lovely person, because she was. But my father was really an interesting person. And he used to walk around the house going, "Beat the system, kids, beat the system," all the time. And I was probably 50 years old when I called my brother one day and I said, when Daddy used to walk around the house saying all the time, "Beat the system," and Peter went, "Yeah." I think he meant it. I think he meant that. Peter said, "Absolutely, he meant it." Talk about Texas. The Texas that I grew up with was, first of all, we think of Texas now as a very conservative state. But excuse me, everyone, I have a cold. Remember Lyndon Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, the Vietnam War, obviously, there's no justification, there's no apologizing here or minimizing the horror of that. And it just happened to be true on a domestic level. He was a profoundly liberal senator. War on poverty. And that was the Texas I grew up with. That was the Democratic Party in Texas at that time. And people like Ramsey Clark, who was his attorney general, a very, very left-wing guy. I don't think there's been such a left-wing attorney general since then. So, and of course, Jim Hightower. If many of you probably know who Jim Hightower is. So that's the Texas I grew up with. And then even, the Bush family moved down there from Kennebunkport, Maine. I see them as, we used to call them the conquering hordes. And then Texas went so Republican and so forth. But even then, Houston has remained a Democratic city. Dallas recently has been a Democratic city. Austin is obviously a Democratic city. So what Texas goes through is what a lot of states go through, where your big cities are more to the left, and then your rural areas are more to the right. So that was the Texas I grew up in. When I grew up in Houston, it was a small city. It was a city, but it wasn't a huge city. Okay, so that's that. Okay, I'm going to go down and see. Oh, my God. I love you, and my husband and I support you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Texas is mostly red, yes. Tell my mom to vote for you. Thank you. Ask Taylor Swift to, yeah, I'm sure I have her phone number and I could just call her and say, "Hey, voting for you in the Democratic primary. Thank you so much." Let's talk about Nevada if we can, everyone. I want to talk to you about two races coming up. Both of them, the early voting has already begun. In South Carolina so South Carolina is on Saturday, Nevada is on next Tuesday. So I hate to have to break it to you, but I doubt it's anything you don't already know. It's a big machine. I'll give you an example. The president has $1 billion. His campaign has $1 billion. And in the last FEC filing, the super PACs set up to support him had $600 million. Now, when I ran in last week in New Hampshire, in those 4 days before the election, my opponent, Dean Phillips, the airwaves were just filled all day, every day with these very slick, very big, very professional television ads that were paid for by these super PACs. So the system is designed to make sure that only those dealing with big amounts of money, and I mean big amounts of money, big amounts of money, or are connected to people who are dealing with big amounts of money, have any chance of getting anywhere near the pinnacles of power. And then you look at so many policies that do not really serve the people, but then you see how the system works. People who have had any close connection to what's really going on in the lives of most people have a very difficult time getting in there. And then something happens in Washington. I don't know what it is. I live there, and I'd always heard that Washington, D.C. is like a bubble. But it's not, it feels more like a walled city. There's something that happens, and they're nice people. Look, they're nice people everywhere. This is none of this. When we talk about a rigged system and we talk about economic injustice, it's not nice people versus not nice people. This is about systems, and it's so important that we remember that, I think. But there's something about being here and that whole behemoth of government. It like buffers people from what the emotional experience is of people out there. And then other people, and this is true of many of the progressives in Congress, they get there. And I'm not saying they forget about the pain that people are experiencing out in America, but they lose their courage. I mean, when I look at some of the progressives who are supporting Joe Biden in this race, even though my policies are so much more aligned with theirs, but that's how it is. It's a club. What did George Carlin say? It's a club and you're not in it. And that's definitely how she is also a recipient of AIPAC. Oh, I am not. Those things are public, by the way, so don't repeat lies. What were we talking about just now? About George Carlin and its club, and you're not in it. So it is a political media industrial complex. Like when I ran last time, and I had a CNN town hall, and I was pretty regularly on CNN and on MSNBC. And this time, it's so clear, the word was put out, do not let her. So, speaking of that, if you do wish to see this campaign continue, I would appreciate it. If you go to Marianne2024.com, could really use donations. Okay. 100% pro-choice, absolutely correct. When you become, can you fix school lunches? I don't know if any of you saw, it's a wonderful movie that Michael Moore made several years ago, quite a few years ago, called Where to Invade Next. And it's not a good title for that movie because it sounds like something military. It wasn't about that at all. It's about how many good ideas came out of the United States, but then were effectuated much more intelligently in other countries. This is amazing, actually. But one of the things that stayed with me was seeing what little French children eat at school. The food. Food is a big thing for me in this campaign. I think it's a big thing for me in life, but it's a big thing for me in this campaign. I hope that when you go to Marianne2024.com, please look at the issues menu, and you'll see food security. We're not going to, when we talk about healthcare, let's talk about that. So we talk about healthcare and how we're going to pay for it, and I definitely stand for an improved Medicare for all. So when I say improved, that means we need to have eyeglasses covered, hearing aids covered, dental covered, and mental health care covered, and it should be Medicare for all. But we also need to talk about why is it that so many more, that America has such a higher level of chronic illness than they do in other advanced democracies. A lot of that has to do with our food. So when I talk about that corporate matrix, that is the system of corporate tyranny that we have here, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food, big chemical companies, big agricultural companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contracts. So this business of big food, we have carcinogens in our food that would not be allowed in other countries. And once you get on the internet and look at the difference in the ingredients in a bottle of ketchup in the United States versus a bottle of ketchup in Canada. So what happened here is that there will be an ingredient, let's say, that increases the shelf life. So remember, there are these principles that guide all of this. And one of the principles is that over the last 50 years, we have put stockholder value before people. So the food company says, well, if we put this ingredient into the food, the prepackaged food, it will increase the shelf life. So if it increases the shelf life, the company will make more money, and then the stockholder value will go up. But it's carcinogen. It should not be in our food. But what this corporate influence, it's called corporate capture of our agencies, which in this case would be Food and Drug Administration, right? What has happened here is that, like when I was a kid, there'd be some FDA agent would go into a grocery store and something was proven to be carcinogen, they get it off the shelves. Today, it's like the best they can do is a nice, polite letter. Please, sir, please, Mr. CEO, consider. So we can't just treat sickness. We have to look at our food policies. We have to have more regulations. What started happening about 40 years ago, they'd call them job-killing regulations. First of all, they're not job-killing regulations, because you actually have to create jobs when you have to create more people to make sure that you are adhering to the regulations. These are safety regulations. These are health regulations. These are environmental regulations. None of us want to be over-regulated. But when it comes to our safety and our health and the food we're feeding our children, so this business of healthy food is a very big deal. Now, I want you to also please go to the whole health plan, because the whole health plan talks about how I already mentioned that, improved Medicare for all, but it's a holistic plan not only to treat sickness, but how are we going to cultivate health? Remember, just like we're talking about, we need to learn how to cultivate peace. We need to learn how to cultivate health. So I'm going to tell you one of my favorite pieces of it, okay? Most of the time when you go to the doctor in the United States, by the way, how you're going to decrease student loan debt, you could use the Higher Education Act, and there are those who argue if you use the Higher Education Act, you could just obliterate all of it. I would certainly try. But I want to go back, because I want to talk about this food, the whole health plan. So if you go to the doctor in the United States today, this is a problem too. This is why we need the Medicare for all. There are 18 million Americans who cannot afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give them. We have 75 to 90 million people who aren't just uninsured but underinsured. This underinsured business, some of you might have this issue. Your insurance will cover you go to the doctor. Won't necessarily cover the tests that the doctor says you need. Won't necessarily cover the operation that the doctor says you need. Won't necessarily cover the medicine that the doctor says you need. Some of these people who are rationing their insulin are insured, but the insurance will not cover as much as they need for their insulin. So in my whole health plan, as I said, most doctors that you meet in the United States, most of them, were educated in a system of Western medicine that was very allopathically, meaning external remedies oriented, and pharmaceutical remedy. So in my plan, if you are diagnosed by the doctor with a particular sickness or a particular condition, if there is a non-allopathic, herbal, some other non-traditional technique that is proven to be as efficacious or even nearly as efficacious as a pharmaceutical remedy, it is mandated that at the doctor's office you will be shown that as well. So you will not just walk out of the doctor's office knowing the pharmaceutical remedy, which might be really great. I mean, this is not to put that down at all, but you will be shown the options, and insurance would cover either one. Love it. So please look at the whole health plan and look at food security. Yes, I stand for ceasefire. I also suggest that you read the tweet. It's a tweet thread about Israel and Gaza that I put out this morning, actually. So that's pretty high up on my on my Twitter. What's your opinion about Biden? I think he's a nice man. Obviously, I'm running against him. I do not believe he is a strong candidate to beat Donald Trump. And I think for those of us who do not wish to see Donald Trump come back into the White House, that's a lot to think about. Somebody asked me there about UBI. Absolutely, look at my website for the plan of UBI. Also, you asked about the Willow Project. One of the first things I will do is cancel the Willow Project. What's going on in Texas? I do not believe that Greg Abbott. I saw that Bobby Kennedy is all with Texas on this. I'm not with Texas on this at all. I am not a fan of Greg Abbott, and I do not believe. I was down in Eagle Pass. I was talking about this the other night. I went and visited there, and that is federal land. And the state does not have jurisdiction, and he's been usurping federal jurisdiction, and the feds have allowed him to. And they have been, I remember these people down there who said to me, the elected officials who said, we feel suppressed by the state government, and we feel abandoned by the federal government. I might bring in someone, actually, as a guest tomorrow or the next night, someone that we could talk about. Do look at my immigration justice plan. And a couple of nights ago, we talked about this as well. We need to address on so many issues, and this was what my presidency would be about in a lot of ways. We need to address not just the symptoms, but the root causes of these problems. And so we have to address the two main issues that drive people to immigrate here from Latin America: economic devastation. And when you're talking about the economic devastation in many of these Latin American countries, absolutely U.S. economic imperialism over the last 40, 50, 60 years had a lot to do with that. So in those places where we, at least indirectly, help to destabilize those economies, we should help to restabilize those economies. And that means, among other things, that we should remove the sanctions on Venezuela. The other thing, of course, is the horrifying violence that is perpetrated by the drug cartels. Look at Marianne 2024 for our drug policies. It's time to end the war on drugs in this country. And as we do that, we will take away a lot of the power, because we'll be taking away the blood of the black market of the drug cartels. Are you on the ballot? Well, there are 50 ballots. We're on the ballot so far in 33 states. Ceasefire now, yes. How would you help the housing crisis? Okay, that's a good one. I think it is fair to say we've moved beyond crisis to emergency. You have 700,000 people, between 600,000 and 700,000 people every night who are unhoused in the United States. There was a statistic that came out the other day that said for half of the renters in the United States, the rent is more than they can afford. So first thing we need to do is stop the commodification of housing. These real estate companies that come in. I was reading, even when I was in Las Vegas, I think, a few weeks ago, and they bought up like 246 houses. The commodification of housing has to do with real estate companies like BlackRock, Vanguard. They come in and they buy all these houses, and then they just sit on them so that they can make money. So this is the vulture. This is the malevolent strain of capitalism. I'm not an anti-capitalist, but this is a malevolent strain of capitalism, vulture capitalism, crony capitalism, whatever you want to call it, where the only sense of responsibility is to the increase in stockholder value for whoever has stock in that company, as opposed to any moral or ethical responsibility to your fellow human beings or to animals or to the planet itself. So we need to create a tax. We need to tax these people up the gazoo so that it would be very, very, very difficult for them to do that. If that is not enough, we need to pass a law that if there's someone who would live in that house, they get the first dibs. Also, we need a tenant's bill of rights, We need to end exclusionary zoning. And we need anywhere from 10 to 20 units of social housing. We need what is in essence a domestic Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan, which was instituted after World War II to help rebuild Europe. And that's what we need to do here. We need to rebuild. We need to rebuild the middle class. We had a thriving middle class in the 1970s. What does a thriving middle class look like? It means the average couple could afford a house. We're talking about the average American having a hard time affording rent. And in 50 years ago, the average American could afford a house. I mean, just think about this. And ranked choice voting, yes, absolutely. Okay? So, in a thriving middle class, the average American couple could own a house, could own a car, yearly vacation, one parent could stay home, one salary could afford to support a family of 4. And they could send their kids to college. That was in the 1970s. So the biggest job, and what I see, my job as your president, should you elect me, is to restore the middle class. But it can't be just tweaking it here or there. It has to be all of the above. Medicare for all, eradicating the college loan debt, subsidized childcare, tuition-free college, paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, guaranteed affordable housing, and a guaranteed living wage. Because the ship is listed so far to the side. And this is where your wealth inequality comes from. Because the policies of making everything about fiduciary responsibility to the stockholder, as opposed to the other stakeholders like the workers and the community and the environment, has shifted all the wealth. $50 trillion that left the hands of the bottom 90%, went into the hands of the top 1%. And you have to get rid of that 2017 $2 trillion tax cut. 83 cents of every dollar went to the highest earners, the highest, wealthiest corporations. You put back in the middle class tax cuts because they should have been there to begin with. You stop it with these corporate subsidies. We pay billions of dollars in subsidies to companies already making billions of dollars in profit. So your tax money goes to helping these companies so that they can develop more products and then turn around and price gouge you. We need a wealth tax where anyone with assets of $50 million, we would tax them another 2%. And if they have $1 billion, tax them another 1%. Their great-grandchildren won't feel it. So Louis Brandeis, the late Supreme Court Justice, said, you can have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy. You cannot have both. It's like putting all the blood in the body into one arm. So my last line of the evening will be that you can have a thriving middle class, and if you have a thriving middle class, you have a thriving democracy. And if you don't have a thriving middle class, you cannot have a thriving democracy, because what you get when you don't have a thriving democracy is that far too many people are left out, as I was saying, as is evidenced by a political system where you have to have so much money to even be in the game. So if you want to help me be in the game so that we can remain and we can be part of this conversation and part of this race and this campaign, I hope you will go to Marianne2024.com. I hope that you will read those issues, see what it's about. Thank you. Someone said, I'll vote for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The Latino vote, I hope that you'll look at on Espanol, all the wonderful Latino social media and on the website. I tell you, I have a little bit of a sore throat, have a bit of a cold. So if it's okay with you, I am going to sign out for the evening because I need to rest my throat. But I hope you feel that we had a little bit of a catch up with each other tonight. And I will be back here tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. I enjoy these little meetings. And I hope you have a beautiful night. And let's just imagine for a moment. You know, a lot of times people say, imagine the life that you want, right? Visualize the life that you want. Let's visualize the country that we want. Let's visualize the planet that we want. You know, one of the things I think that we need to do is sort of imagine the planet in 100 years without war, and then reverse engineer from there. So just imagine in your mind, you know, what would the planet be like if there was no war anywhere? Now, some people say that's very naive of me. I think what's naive is to think that it's reasonable to assume we'll even still exist as a species on this planet in another 100 years if we don't at least try. We need a Department of Peace. We need a peace academy as well as a war academy, a military academy. We need peace games as well as war games. We'll talk about that on another night. In the meantime, imagine. Imagine all the waters healed, the oceans cleansed, the air cleansed, the earth healed, all the food clean, no unnecessary suffering. Just imagine it. Imagine it. We can create it, but it's going to take a lot of work. We may as well get started. Much love to you. God bless. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening, and I'll see you tomorrow night at 10. Bye.